Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Businessology Show. We learn how to run service-based companies, agencies, all these things that are not easy to do. So we have great guests to give us really the foundational ways to do this. And Jen Dary was on the show years ago before the pandemic and before the world changed. And so she is, this is going to be good. Leadership coach, entrepreneur, brain tumor survivor, mom, podcast host. She's done a lot of stuff, instructor, teacher, and she started Plucky in 2013 after some soul searching. And now has worked with Google, Facebook, Slack, Code for America, New York Times, all kind of stuff. So Jen, thank you for coming back on the Businessology Show. I'm glad to have you back.
Jason, I've been waiting 4 years. I'm so glad we're picking up this conversation.
Well, it's good to have you back. So really because you have a lot of training programs, resources, specialized tools. Yeah. Like what are those things? Like, are you trying to help people be better leaders, managers? Is that kind of your deal?
Good question. Well, the genesis of Plucky is that I was at an agency before starting my own thing, and I was the director of employee development. And in that capacity, I was, we were a small shop, maybe 30 people or so. And we would take somebody who's really good at the content of their work, like design or code, and then we would make them in charge of the other designers or coders. And that never seemed to work because we didn't give any sort of guidance for how to be successful with a very different job. When you're in charge of humans, it's really different. Right. So I saw that there was space in the market and also kind of in the world to say, hang on, you're not just ready yet, let's not set you up to go and then burn it down, get laid off, and now have a new complex when re-entering the workforce in your next job. So I was like, this feels like it could be more efficient. So it kind of all started with that. But I think that as time goes on, to your point, a lot of other things have evolved, including some trainings and products. And I'm really just trying to help people talk to each other. Yeah. So much of, kind of hilariously, so much of the positive moments in the middle of coaching, people will say like, oh my gosh, can I just like zoom you into my headphones when I need to give that conversation, and I can be planting the words because it can be really hard to know how do I say it authentically, but crucially. And it's easier when you're not in the situation yourself. And people have very random talents. You're very good at money. I happen to be good at words. So that's helpful.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. Well, and it's, we do a lot of coaching too. And it's wild to know. And of course, we get coached and things like that. And it's wild to come to a point and realize, I don't know myself as well as I thought I did. And it's really cool when somebody comes to you for coaching probably and goes, I think I don't know myself. I don't know what I'm doing. Why am I saying the things I'm saying? Can you help me figure myself out? And that's a pretty cool when they're an open book. And you probably just dive in and go, let me ask you some questions.
I do ask those questions. And also, some people are open to like chapter 1 and other people are like, hello, change me, So every client I have is different. And that depends probably on the senior level that they're at or seniority, I guess I'll say it like that. Depends on gender, depends on previous coaching experience or not. And so it's my job as a coach and a practitioner to build trust and respect where they're willing to go and where they're not. And I think there's a New York Times article a couple months ago about how coaching has taken over everything. And these pyramid schemes are, coach trainings where people are sinking like 20 grand into going through and getting coach or training and stuff. And I have feelings about all those things. I think there are some very real concerns with all that. But ultimately, I don't think everybody's ready to be broken open and saved. I think people sometimes have specific questions. Like to your point, I want a promotion. I want to come across strong in interviews. What should I say differently? Or how should I say it? Or which stories that I've lived could I use in an interview? And that is a really finite, great little season of coaching to do to prep somebody for their next job. Yeah. And then, of course, in other cases, people are like, oh, God, I've gone so wrong. I have no idea who I am. What's my career about? And then those tend to be very wide open.
Yeah. And so as a coach, you got to know, because if people open up the door, you can go really to some of the deepest parts of people. But some people would be like, whoa, why are you going there? I'm talking about a promotion. And you've got to really know, because a coach can go super deep
Oof.
and start talking about their parents and stuff like that. But if you jump into sections of their life in ways they don't want you to, that's a little intrusive. So a skilled coach like you've been doing this for so many years. You got to know where to walk your way in, jump in. How do you know when to just dive deep with a scalpel, or how do you know to go?
Oh, what a question!
What's your middle name, and how to go real slow? How do you know where to go and how fast to go in coaching?
Man, that is such a meta question. I had said before we started recording that I had some notes about my own journey finding coaches. And I just started working with a coach now, and she's great. And she asked me in our first session, she said, okay, so are we just working together because you need a coach during your certification process, which would be totally fine, or do you have other stuff? And I was like, oh, I got problems. Don't worry. We have plenty of content, And so we, in the first session or two are finding our groove for where I want to go and where I don't. And I think the key word here is that she's being very respectful with my own boundaries. The first, it was right when I was starting Plucky. There was a very famous coach who worked at the company where my husband was. This guy's written books. He's like, whatever, very famous. And my husband said, hey, would you get coffee with my wife? She's thinking of starting her own business. So I meet him at this coffee shop in Brooklyn. And, I'm bright-eyed and excited to entrepreneur myself, And I started sharing what I was curious about doing and driven by. And I don't even know what happened, but he dug so specifically that I ended up sobbing publicly in this Brooklyn coffee shop. And it made me doubt like all kinds of huge things. Afterwards, I remember I just went into this bookstore nearby to like clean myself up. And I was thinking like, I lost all this confidence that I had going into that conversation. And it still is like, use your powers for good, man. He knew it's sort of like, those pressure point things where you can like pressure point someone and then they like die or whatever, He knew what he was doing, and he manipulated that in a way that felt very unsafe, actually. And looking back, I felt like really, like unsafe or taken advantage of. And now I avoid that guy with like the plague. And I also have met other people who don't respect that, and they kind of want to like show off like how quickly they could point some things out. I think that is not cool. And if you ever get the hint of that when you're interviewing coaches, leave that, because you don't want to be in a situation where someone is digging in a place that you're either maybe not yet ready to share or that you don't even want to be in.
Yeah. That's interesting, because coaching is very collaborative. It's not only you coaching well, but it's them being open and letting you into certain parts of the places that they're ready to share.
Yeah.
Sometimes when we coach, we'll tell them, anytime I ask you something you're uncomfortable with, that's when you get to shut it down. You hold all the power in this relationship. So,
and it's good of you to remind them of that.
Yeah, because they do forget, and maybe they'll get too open and go, should I be talking about this? It's like, I don't know. Should you?
Yeah. Well, and I think part of how each session starts with my coaching clients is I say, all right, catch me up since last time, and then I say, what do you want to talk about today? So it's always this clean slate. Cool. And whatever they bring is what we're focused on. We don't have to, go back and rehash 50 million things. Right. And then, as conversations go, the flow will stop at some point from the topic that they've brought. And then I might say, what else should we say about this? And then if there's anything else to squeeze out, then they're off and running in that direction. But if not, they say, I don't know. I was also thinking that we should talk about, and then we go to the next thing, right? Cool. But that's sort of my little litmus test of, are you okay with this, or should we keep pursuing?
That's cool. It's cool how you meter the person in the conversation and kind of let them walk you to the next room they want you to come in and look at and talk to them about it. Yeah,
people are they know themselves and they know what they want. It's just so rare now at this point, right? To feel that you're in a safe place where you could ask for those things. Media, everything wants you to look at something or pay attention to something that's exterior to you. And I think if people feel like you're really listening to them and that you'll follow them where they want to go, it's like a warm bath. It's really luxurious to have someone pay attention to you.
I know, it's very cool. All right. So this is just a softball question. How have people changed since the pandemic? And you and I do human work with other people very regularly. So you see a lot of people change and you go, wow, I am a very different person. So we're very aware of this, but I would love your high level view of people are different. Is that even a right statement? People are totally different. And teams and leaders specifically, like what are you seeing post-pandemic and the economies and the elections all funky too?
Oh.
So can you like parse through all that and
yes.
I don't know what else to say.
Let me give you my master's thesis here.
Go ahead and next hour hit me.
Well, I think we are different. And I think what you're hitting the nail on the head there is that yes, it is pandemic and, right? Yeah. So we've got pretty massive instability in our country right now, especially in terms of leadership, a lot of distrust, not a lot of assumption benefit of the doubt. Yep. And that trickles down immediately to the people that lead our organizations. Yep. So if you don't trust the people, on whatever side of the fence you're on for political parties, if you don't trust the people leading, then you're going to look at the next level down and, all the way down to your job. So unfortunately, I think leadership is playing from a defensive stance at this point. You're seeing more unions than ever. You're seeing resistance when it comes to things like return to office, which, there's no silver bullet. It's not like everyone should be at work or everyone should be at home.
Right.
But there's resistance all over the place. And I think that there's more flexibility pre-pandemic, maybe unfairly, maybe that this is all in the direction of a positive change. But something happened when we were all at home and everybody could see everybody's kids and pets and dirty laundry and literally, and it sort of, I think, revived this feeling of I am also a person, not just an employee. Yeah. That kind of spiked, right? Like we saw, we saw that like, oh my gosh, we're all so important and human. Right. And then it was like, now you're still a robot, it like kind of has kind of re-regulated itself a little bit. Yeah. But I do think we are having, I think the employee experience is having a bit of an identity crisis. And we're not really sure, are we still allowed to be a person? Can we both work from home and co-parent and one of us gets the kids while the other one's in a meeting? Yeah. Or does one of us has to be in the office and now we need a babysitter? All those family systems changed. Or also, if you can work remotely, not everybody has to be in the big urban centers where the jobs must be for offices. They, during the pandemic, a lot of people moved, myself included, to be closer to family and have more support for, our family systems. Yeah. So the economics of that, I leave to you, but certainly the cultural impact of that stuff has changed. Maybe also what we even think we can ask for.
Yeah. And has it changed permanently? Is there some permanence to this, or is there some level of, no, this is still sorting itself out. It'll get to a different normal. What do you think about that? That's
a good question. So I'm 43, and I would really love to be able to say, this is just like, some other part of the world, history of the world. But I probably wasn't old enough or just experienced enough to reflect like that. I think another thing that is present is AI. Everybody's, thinking about that too. And some of this stuff feels like the cat's out of the bag. We're not putting that back in, like working remotely is out of the bag. Like, that's probably never going away. Right. But I think, we're, again, I speak mostly from the tech sector because that's mostly who I work with. But there are a lot of jobs that are going to change in the next 5 years, change the shape of, or maybe even go away completely. And I'm not saying that everybody's losing their job, nothing like that. But even front-end developer, for example, I coach a couple people who are in that realm. Yeah. And they say, like, I am prepared that within 5 years, I am going to need a different skill set because AI and, all kinds of stuff is going to evolve into that. That's not particularly shocking. I mean, tech jobs have changed over and over again in the last 25 years. But it does feel a little out of control right now. So I'm not sure what to predict, although I think we can both agree change always happens. So best to get your shit together and prepare thyself for whatever's coming next.
That's right.
God, the election is coming soon. Like everybody, batten down the hatches. Where are we going, Jason?
Yeah, no, this is hard. So, and even during the pandemic, the tech sector went through a number of little bubbles, like they just hired a pile of people and then fired a whole pile of people. Just
well said.
Yeah, crazy stuff, happening.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is private equity and venture capital. The funding is pumping in different directions now. And AI, I didn't even think about that, but we've worked with some agency owners and they're like, I have nightmares about AI. And it's like, no, they were not joking. They're like, I wake up in the middle of the night thinking I'll lose, because it's so life-changing. It's so real. It's like, front-end development, I mean, AI can kind of do that, just kind of dump code into the, Chat GPT. It's going to come up with, the right screens. And so there's do you think fear is driving what people are just sorting through their fear? Is that what they're dealing with maybe?
Probably. We all are probably, right? All the time. But I think the AI stuff it's like just technical enough that nobody really knows what it is. And unless you really know what it is. And frankly, the people that really know what it is aren't that freaked out. So, they're like, yeah. Like my husband's a senior staff developer and he's like, yes, it's a big deal. And also it's not as big a deal as everybody thinks it is. That said, we do need to have our eyes open. And, the agency owners you talk about, I have a lot of empathy for that. It is a changing landscape. Yeah. But the only thing to do when that's happening is to change also.
Yeah.
So if you're like, okay, AI is going to wipe out this section of the business. What does that mean? It means you got to get another idea. So, of course, there will always be some that's left and you can still pick up some of those pieces if you're looking for clients and sales, but it's going to get thinner and thinner, right, in terms of the funnel. So, so start wondering what are the kind of offshoot industries, careers, services that AI is going to need to partner with. Because you can't like leave the world to the robots. Like somebody has to be interfacing there and knitting this together, and I'm talking half out my ass here because I'm not technical and I don't know all about AI to those depths, but there are inevitably going to be so many little external resources to help. So why not you, right? Why not look at it, look at ChatGPT, have a new idea for how that could integrate. And my favorite thing is when people take two different industries and fuse them. So like, what is AI in healthcare? Okay, yeah. What is AI in climate change, right? Like, okay, put two weird things in a bowl and shake it up. Now what do you have? Instead of just the classic AI and front-end developers. Then I think you get more interesting things going on.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. Well, one thing you said, it's interesting. So your husband's a senior senior staff. And there's something about experience and life history that makes you go, I can see it a little bit better. I mean, you've been doing this a long time. Yeah. So you can kind of go, I've been through a lot of ups and a lot of downs. So I've got a lot of benchmarking ability, And so is there more fear in younger people than older people? That's very general. Well, there's some labels.
That's a great question.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. I think the most freaked out people are in the middle. Like the younger people, they haven't seen anything yet. So they're like, what? What's going on? And then the older people they've seen a lot. So they're like, oh, please, young child. The middle people are like, uh-oh. How freaked out should we be? So
I still got to pay 40s. Bills and put kids through college.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I think there's something to be said about depth of experience. So even if you're an older person, but you've only ever had one job, or one type of job, then, maybe you're going to weather the storm differently than somebody who changed careers midway through their life or, otherwise. And what we're really talking about here, right, is the ability to be resilient in the face of lots of change. We're talking about economy and work. Obviously, you mentioned in the intro, I had a craniotomy in 2016 to remove a really large brain tumor. And that experience stays with me every single day,
Yeah.
you know, and I try not to think about it all the time. Obviously, I, you know, have done a lot of work to rebalance and get to a healthy place with it. But it, when I evoke it, it reminds me of what is important and what is not important. And that can be also really rebalancing. So I think sometimes that's why coaching can be good, because if somebody has a problem set that they bring, I say, have you ever done anything like this before? Have you ever had this kind of challenge before? Even if it was like in high school or, you know, something else. And often we find that we have had other experiences, even if they weren't the same shape, and we can learn something from how we responded last time.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can benchmark. How'd you do it then?
Yeah.
What'd you do well? What did you not do? What would you have done differently? Yeah. That's good. That's good stuff. Good stuff.
Thanks.
Well, what about, let's kind of narrow into work.
Let's do it.
Go into work. And I think a lot of people you coach, they're in their work situation, right? You're helping them with their work. Is that right?
Yeah, usually. Or they're thinking about leaving maybe. And then that's when they start to engage a coach to help. Like, should I get a new job? Should I get a promotion?
Yeah. Okay. So it was really interesting what you said at the beginning of the show, which is in the services technical professions, even mine in the accounting world or technology designers, a lot of these people that become leaders were technical in some nature first. They were a developer. They were an accountant. They were something like a degreed thing. Yeah. And then they're leading, which leading has nothing to do sometimes with the technical nature. It's nice to know that technical aspect, but a lot of times just because you're a great developer, let's make you the senior developer over all the developers. And it's like, that doesn't match up necessarily.
Different ballgame.
It's a different, leadership is not senior developing, whatever that is.
Exactly. Yes.
So, how do you help people be better leaders? If they were technical in nature, are you helping them shed some technical thing and go, don't ask the person about that. Ask them how they're feeling today. Like, how do you help them be a better leader if they come from a technical perspective originally?
Well, I think this is where a job description always really helps. So if you have someone who was, we'll just say, an individual contributor, a developer, and they get promoted into an engineering manager role, I'd first say, like, bring your job. Like, what do they tell you have to do?
Nice.
And now here's a really simple first way that organizations that don't prioritize writing and documenting that stuff down, this is your first chance to screw it up. If you haven't told the person, here's what we now expect, and here's what we'll be talking about in our performance reviews, then you haven't set them up to even know what the hell they're supposed to be doing every day. So first we look for a job description. And if there isn't one present, then maybe I say, well, why don't you see what you can like squeeze out of your manager before our next session as some kind of ad hoc job description. And then usually that has something to do with, leading a certain number of people on a team, getting a certain number of features shipped, I don't know, per quarter, whatever the progression of the product is or the services. And then we start to say, okay, great. What do you already know how to do? And inevitably, there will be some parts of each of those tasks that they know, and then other stuff that's a black hole. And so then we start to talk about, well, okay, great. What are the core things of management? And one would be, you are now responsible for these 4 people, and their productivity. So then I'll say, tell me about them. Okay, Joey's like this, Sally's like this. And if the person says, I got a guy named Joey. Yeah, I think he lives in Denver. I'm like, okay, beep, we got to back it up. Like, you got to call Joey right now and find out what the hell's going on, right? So you have to build those relationships. And so I think that's kind of the next place. Once we know what the job is, then I say, now start to find out, who are these X factors? And you're in charge of them developing. So you have to ask.
That's cool.
Well, yeah, there's a lot to go into. But yeah, like know the people in your chain.
Yeah. That's a very human view of leadership, which that sounds like, well, that's weird. Of course, leadership is very human. That's actually what it is. But,
one hopes, Jason.
Well, but people don't approach it that way, right? You're like, bring your job description. They're like, these people don't matter. I don't know their first name. And it's like, no, you need to know their children's name and their pet's name. Like they love those things.
Yeah.
And if the dog gets hurt, they're going to care about taking it to the vet way more than delivering the feature to you. And you really want to know what they're about to prioritize and which meeting they're going to skip.
I mean, bingo. That's what you just nailed right there. Because although I sound and am very human friendly, the reality is that also you will not be successful if you don't know how to strategically move these people forward. And you cannot manage and move people forward towards success if you have no idea of, like, if they're a black box to you. Yeah. So if you know that someone on the team has disclosed that their wife was recently diagnosed with an illness, you can, in the back of your head, plan, all right, we're shipping that around Thanksgiving. I might want to have a contractor on hand because I think that's when his wife is going into surgery. Like you now are a strategic resourcer. And again, I do love people. And I also love the math behind it. So it's like, okay, the more information you know, and I don't mean like go dig up all their dirty personal secrets. That's not what I mean, but more just like, what's the relevant landscape around you and where might you need to shift people into different places? Who's getting bored? Who's a flight risk? Who is just so excited about their work that they actually accidentally work until 10 p.m. every night? How much you leverage that, right? Like be smart about the knobs that you can twist and turn on this team so that you have a really humming machine that can work towards something and that you can predict as best you can any hiccups that might come along the way, because they will come. And if you're caught completely with no margins and you've stressed everybody out and everybody's exhausted, then you've done a really poor job of the resourcing part of your job. Yeah.
Well, you just described leadership really well. It is just a really high level manager of people, obviously. And that's why just a technical hire may or may not fit that. But, I got to say, leadership can wear your ass out. Because all you just described it. I care about your spouse's surgery. Now it is in my box of helping move you forward technically for the company. Yep. But I do care about that, and you may need to step out for a week or so. Yep. So it is in that box. But hearing all the people's stuff, I got my own stuff. So I got to sort through their stuff, my stuff, and emotionally I just get pretty drained. I get worn out, and then I'll yell at somebody, which turns out to not be good, for that person or that relationship. Yeah. So leadership is very sometimes can be emotionally burdensome. Now we like to tell people that's true, but it can also be very empowering, and you can really start to love these people, which is kind of a cool gift that you can have with the people that you lead. So how do you balance not getting freaking burned out with everybody else's problems when I got my own problems? So I sound very cranky.
No, listen, it's funny. I knew this word was going to come up 10 times in this conversation and now here it is. But there's this phrase, self-regulation. Yeah. And I've been thinking about this all year because we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier too, but I have been doing some coach training in the ADHD space. And self-regulation, the long and short of it, is your ability to control yourself by yourself. So if you're cranky, you say, am I hungry? Do I need a glass of water? Yeah. Did I not sleep well last night? And I should probably get up and get some fresh air. Do I need to put my standing desk up? Do I need to sit down? Right? Like that we trust you that you can self-regulate and figure that out. And that goes, I just mentioned a couple of different body things, but it could also be that your wife is about to have surgery and you know that you're pretty strung out. And so therefore you decline a couple meetings the day before. Like, how are you regulating yourself? If you are a leader who has a lot of stuff going on outside of work, then you're going to need an even bulked up support system, a more bulked up support system than normal, to allow you to show up neutral, calm, consistent, reassuring. And that, like, if you could be a manager that shows up regulated, calm, reassuring, but also maybe high expectations for the people around you, you're such a gift to everybody because they don't need to account for your stuff in their own sphere, on their own plate. If you're freaking out and you show up and that's bleeding into every meeting, they have to be like, okay, we're talking about the work, but also don't say that because Jason's pissed today, and don't, and that is like so fatiguing for everybody and inefficient ultimately. So I think that self-regulation is such a great goal to shoot for everybody, but particular for leaders, because they have power in the room, and it means that their, I don't know what I want to say here, like energetic presence, the way they come into a room is going to, the blast radius is much larger than it would be for, third developer from the left.
Yeah. And I think, is it true they don't realize sometimes the power and the weight of their words? It's like, if you say get it done Tuesday, I mean, it can freak the whole room out.
Yeah.
Or it's a relief that you didn't say Friday.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's self-awareness, right? You need to be aware also of the impact. And usually people figure that out by like touching a hot stove. They say, get it done by Tuesday. And then everybody shows up, looking like nightmare because they stayed awake all night Monday. And you're like, oh shit. Actually, I mean, I just meant vaguely Tuesday,
Right.
So they usually figure that out, hopefully without, burning out the whole team.
Right.
But it is another big lesson. I think of it as like Girl Scout badges you earn as a manager. First time you fire somebody, first time you hire somebody, first time you give them a raise, and the first time you burn everybody out.
Right.
one for the books. Hopefully you don't do it a second time.
That's right. Don't do it a second time. Well, so let's just say you were coaching me as a leader. Say, hey, you got to be, I love the word neutral. That's pretty cool. That really, that feels balanced, right? You got to regulate yourself. You got to walk in the room neutral. But if you were coaching me as a leader, it's like, yeah, but I'm not. I'm worn out. Like, do I need to not go in that room? Like, do I need to take a break? Do I need to talk to my superior and go, I don't know if I can lead right now?
What a good question. I mean, I think it depends. Do you have like the sniffles, or do you have like a migraine, or do you have like, gallstones? Like, what level of not okay are you? And if it's early stage, then take a mental health day, call out sick, watch some Netflix, come back the next day. And if it's more significant, closer to burnout, maybe where this is something that has kind of followed you for a couple of weeks or months or maybe even longer, then it takes, it's so hard, Jason, but it's amazing when somebody is able to say, you know what, I need 2 months away. And I hope that doesn't break everything that's going on here. But I'm not my best self. And actually I'm like I'm below sea level right now. And I don't want that to be the version of myself that you all see. And hopefully if you've built trust with the organization, if it's at all possible, even to take unpaid leave for a month or two, or, oh my gosh, whatever, a short-term disability, I have a client who recently her father passed around the holidays, I want to say. She came back very quickly and has never really processed it, and was kind of just like busy. And it hit her in the summer. And so she said, by September 1st, I need to take 2 months off. I don't know what I'm going to do during that time, but that was a big deal. And, she has to move her mother somewhere. And I was like, that is so self-aware. And I appreciate that she has been lucky enough, but also strategic enough to have some savings to allow her every once in a while to pull off on the side of the highway and say, hang on, I'm not okay.
Yeah. No, that's good. Because it seems more common. Some of our clients and our team have some grief, and things have happened to them, especially through COVID, that, took people from some of us.
Right.
So people go through some kind of massive trauma. And then in the pandemic, we're all kind of freaking out. We don't know what we're doing. So we certainly don't deal with that. But then it's coming back. That stuff does not, not lie dormant forever. And when it comes back, they don't know what the hell is going on. They're being washed over by these waves. And we're like, what has happened to you? You are a different person. Yeah. And so this stuff is long-term, and it does hit you. So that's pretty cool that person could learn to process it. But we're seeing a lot of people that didn't, and they're flipping out, man.
I mean, there's a point then where if you don't have the self-awareness and foresight to be proactive about it, meaning I need to take some time off and handle this, unfortunately, 9 times out of 10, you're eventually going to be removed.
Yeah.
And not from your own volition. So, you could kind of like, open the eyeballs and get ahead of it. And it's really unfortunate when people, I'll say it like this, maybe sounds a little callous, but they aren't prioritizing themselves. They prioritize everything else. They go to work, they answer the emails, but obviously everybody around them is, getting more and more fed up with this persona that they're kind of showing up with. And at some point it's like, ding, this is not the right person anymore. So they are then removed from the role. And now you have a person who's been burned out, possibly from a traumatic experience, maybe in grief, and they're out of a job. Yeah. And the way they got out of that job is they were fired or, not because of economic cuts.
And it's traumatic.
That stays with them. Right, exactly. So that's kicking a person when they're down. Yeah. But of course, I just mean that cosmically. It's not like the boss, could have done it. So anyway, the best thing to do in that case, if you're really not up for what's going on and you really think you're not in a good direction, step away before you're removed because you at least have agency in that decision.
Yeah, that's interesting. And a great leader sometimes can see that and go, hey, you're not really, something's going on in your life.
Yeah, great.
And so you need to step away because I don't want this to get worse because you are struggling with some of your work and I don't want you to struggle. You didn't used to, because I think what we're seeing people change and we're like, what has happened to you? And some kind of layering effects of multiple things are coming back and it's just starting to punch them in the stomach and they're not even aware. But a good leader can notice it if the person won't notice it about themselves, I guess.
Yeah, and there are very gentle ways to start that conversation to say, hey, is everything okay? I've noticed the last few months have seemed kind of hard. Maybe they don't want to tell you. So that's okay. That's the first time you've at least noticed it.
Right.
And maybe a couple weeks later you say, I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, but I want to follow up on it. I really do feel like the last 6 months or so, you haven't been yourself or the way that I know you to be. Yeah. And it occurs to me that, your dad passing last year, I don't know if that's kind of still on your mind, but have you ever considered taking a break? You seem maybe like you're moving towards burnout. You don't even have to mention the dad if you feel like that's inappropriate, but you can just sort of acknowledge, have you ever wondered if you're burned out? Or, especially if you're their manager and could possibly offer something like, would you want to take, a month away, step away. And if you're offering that, have some documentation in hand, like short-term disability information or whatever, because sometimes those ideas seem so hard to even, what does that even mean? Short-term disability, would I get paid? Do I not get paid? So if you could make that a really easy option to say, listen, we have this little one pager. It tells you what it's like. I'm going to give it to you. If you think that would be helpful, I want you to know we want to support you. We want you back in fighting shape. And we're getting closer to the holidays. If you wanted to take December, that wouldn't impact the company so greatly. Be prepared when you're in that leadership role, because if you have ever been depressed or known someone depressed, it is very hard to make decisions from that angle. And so any extra information you could provide them will make it easier to take you up on your offer.
Yeah, very cool. Jen, I have more questions. We're running out of time. Can I keep asking you questions?
Do it.
Okay. I've got more questions, so I need to keep you here while I have you. It's something you said a minute ago is it is our job to self-regulate ourselves through all of this hard stuff we're all going through. You got to do your own work, right? We're seeing some people do expect the company or the leaders to regulate them, and they don't regulate themselves, meaning they're not often aware, or sometimes we're asking them to give feedback and they flip out like, oh my God, you hate me. And it's like, no, I just want feedback. That's, if you'll go read that post again, it really just asks for feedback. Yeah. I feel like some people are putting the burden on me as the leader, as the company, to do their regulation when I'm going, I think that's your job. Now that can get pretty offensive if you go, it ain't my job to help you regulate and come in this room neutral. But I can help you, but you're sure not taking your part up too. I don't know how to help people put it on their plate when it's their responsibility without offending anybody.
Yeah.
And of course, I have an opinion as their leader, and they probably have an opinion as a team member. How do you sort through whose responsibility is it to self-regulate yourself?
Well, it's always the individuals, but what you're alluding to is the awkward conversation when they don't.
Right.
And they kind of expect someone else to. And I will also just say that I don't know, we would have to call some therapists in, but I don't know what percentage of the world does self-regulate. Some days it feels like it's 2%. I mean, go get in traffic. 0% of people in traffic self-regulate.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
They are like, I deserve to be here. You do not deserve to be right here. So, but then they'll cut someone off later. So it's just it's like traffic is such a perfect manifestation of like workplace communication and how someone would communicate or not at work. Yeah. I'm like, I would never work with you. You don't put your blinker on. You would never tell us a heads up of anything, Anyway. So really what I think helps in the case that you're laying out is being direct. So in the same way of what's the job description, I think in this moment too, you sort of evoke that where you look at that and you say, okay, so here's the deal. We are working together to get project A finished. This part of the job is for you. And this part of the job I can empower, clear blocks for, shield you from certain things. This is kind of the limit of what my role is here. And the rest of it is for you to accomplish. So given that, and given that we want project A to ship in 2 weeks, what do I need to know about where you're at right now? And then you let them talk and they will say things. And if they're like, I'm so tired and I can't do it in 2 weeks, then I think you can say, so I understand and I've been there before, but it's not a nice to have. 2 weeks is the deadline. And so, I mean, we can check in tomorrow to see how progress has gone today. We could check in Friday, but ultimately that's what we need to hit. And if we get to next Monday and you're still, haven't made X progress or whatever, then we're going to have a more serious conversation. And that's that escalation. But you can't be afraid to escalate it sometimes because if you never escalate it, then they'll, of course, never do it. It's like with kids. If you say like, don't do that. Okay, fine. Here's a candy bar, but don't do it again. It's like, okay, well, that's, you made that mess yourself. So being consistent, neutral, reassuring, and supportive, but direct and high expectations, that is setting you up for those moments when you might need to have a difficult conversation about you're not pulling your weight. You aren't able to like sort of regulate your own energy right now. Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, I think I'm hearing you say even in the place we're in now as a human race, after the pandemic, we still get to lead, which is be direct, be kind, be caring, not probing, be neutral, but also expect you to fulfill your job. You accepted it and you're getting paid. We never forgot to pay you. These are conversations we have sometimes, unfortunately.
Great line.
And it's like we've never skipped a paycheck. We didn't just skip it. The deadlines get skipped sometimes, and we're not sure that it seems like we don't have a good contract here. You're saying no as leaders, we get to be direct still. And it is the responsibility of people to own a lot of the things they are meant to manage, and we do get to help them also.
Last night I was at back to school night for my new middle schooler. My son is in 6th grade this year. And the U.S. history teacher said, now there is something I tell your kids all the time and they might come home and tell you. So I'm just going to tell you right now where it comes from. And she writes on the board, it says, high expectations are a sign of respect.
Ooh.
And I was like, I'm going to tattoo that on my face.
No, that's cool.
Like,
that's
what?
Super cool.
So it's this idea that if I have a high expectation for you, it means that I respect and believe in the quality that you can do. Wow, I think you can do it. Cool. I would not give you unreasonable expectations. I believe knowing you, knowing the talents you have and what we hired you to do and all this kind of stuff, I respect where you're at. And maybe sometimes we back down too much from high expectations. Don't be unreasonable. Don't be Elon Musk. I mean, that guy's bananas. But have come from it from like respect, and then you really start to pivot all your conversation around that. Where the call outs you do, well done for you. I know that was a challenge, but you got it over the finish line. Good job for so and so. Like the way you appreciate and have a culture of appreciation. all maybe starts hinging around the respect you have for the practitioners in your room. That really, and people like really feel excited when that you respect them, right? And you're so outward about it.
Yeah. But sometimes you have to tell them, me expecting things from you is me respecting you. Now,
exactly. I know you can do it.
Yeah. And you may have a perception that you're like, your expectations are too high. And it's like, so a leader can be direct and go, actually, I think you can do it. I actually believe in you sometimes more than you believe in yourself, which can be, that is a truth, right? A leader can believe more accurately that somebody can do something they don't believe that they can, and that can be more accurate. And so that is a sign of respect, just to let them know.
I think so. And to be honest, if you're in that level of conversation where it's like, I think this is a reasonable deadline, and I'm the manager, and the other person says, I don't think that's a reasonable deadline, and I'm an individual contributor, you're already screwed because you both have like one mouth, you know?
Right.
So like now you're at the same level. So before it gets to that point, as a leader, again, you show up with calm presence to say, okay, so the deadline is 2 weeks from Friday. I'm concerned because we are only 30% of the way to where we need to be. Tell me what's going on. Often you can just give a big question like that. Like, what's going on? You tell me about what's going on with the team today. And then you just leave a giant pregnant pause, like an elephant level pregnant pause. And you just sit there. And now it's to them to say words to you.
Yeah.
And they will say, well, what's going on is, the client was late and blah, blah, blah. And then you can make a reasonable adjustment. So you can say, okay, understood. It sounds like a lot, but it also sounds like a classic run of the mill. It'll be a little bit tight, but I think the team can get it done. So let's move forward, keeping that deadline, and we'll check in 2 days, make sure progress is continuing.
Yeah.
Let me know if there's any emergencies. Bye.
I love it.
Right? Then you get out.
I love sometimes as a coach, we know how to use a question as a scalpel and dig very specifically.
Yeah.
That question you just asked was kind of big, which left a lot of room for them to move around in and go, I feel like crap, to say some very broad things too, which open up a door back for you as a leader to go, okay, what do you mean by crap right now? Do you feel like crap now or crap yesterday?
Right.
And so I like the broader approach when they're unaware. Is that when you do it? When they don't know where they are, you give them room to walk around and go, I feel like shit, I want to punch somebody. And it's like, all right, who you want to punch today? Give them room.
If you need to reassert the power dynamic, a giant question is really helpful because often we'll be like, so I've noticed that you're having a hard time. And I was thinking it might be because of the dog dying, or it could, it's been terrible weather and maybe the dew point and, and so if that's, it is what it is. Okay, great. So we'll just move the deadline. Shut up.
Right.
You're talking everyone out of any progress. So all you need to say is so here's the deal. Deadline is in 2 weeks. And it doesn't look great from this side of the house. What are you seeing over
What is
there?
going on? Yeah.
And then they have to participate. They might tell you something that you have never even known about. So the client literally changed all the logins and didn't give them to us last week.
There you go.
And we spent the entire week problem solving, right? And then you're like, oh, all right, call the client.
Right.
But they also will feel a little of the heat in that moment, as they should, because that's how we all get work done.
Yeah. Good stuff. Okay. This is really good stuff. And I've got to wrap it up. I know I keep saying I'm going to wrap it up.
That's right. We're in good flow here.
Right. We're good flow. So I think we're hearing people, this is a funny story. We're hearing people mention ADHD more. And I don't know what that is. Are they noticing it more? But it's a funny story. I think I have it. I don't know. Never been diagnosed. But it's funny when clients go, hey, Jason, you ever been tested for that? And my partner, she's sitting beside me going, and I'm like, no, why would you ask something like that? They're like, you have it. And I'm like,
how interesting.
What? And my partner's like, oh, that's funny. He doesn't know. It's not scary to me because I'm like, well, yeah, of course I'm off the rails sometimes. But is it becoming more common? Do people just not know that? Or
good
is
question.
have we created more of that? ADHD
Right.
really is a struggle sometimes to really focus. What do you see?
I understand that totally. So my involvement in this is that last year, 2023, it was like one after the next client started disclosing, by the way, I have ADHD, or by the way, my kid was diagnosed. And I don't know if you know, but like 80+% of the time it's hereditary. So what's happening now is we have better testing for kids. So kids are getting diagnosed, and then it's like, okay, well, who gave them that?
Yeah.
and so then that starts to, as you start to think about how do we support my kid? Oh, working memory issues, executive function. Hang on a second. I never use a calendar.
Right.
It starts to have some self-awareness there. So anyway, all of these clients started disclosing it. And I thought, I don't know how to support that. I don't even really know what it is. I think my mental model at that point was probably based on like 1992, like little boys running around a classroom couldn't sit still.
Right.
And actually it's like completely different than that, as per usual in society. We're taking like a decade to catch up with anything relevant, but ADHD is a lot of things, but most fundamentally it means that your prefrontal cortex, the front part of your brain, is a different shape.
Yeah.
If you do an MRI of people with ADHD and with not, the prefrontal cortex is different shape. It operates differently. What happens in prefrontal cortex? So that is things like working memory, like I just said, executive functioning, organizational skills, the ability to multitask. And then it also kind of like screws with, sometimes helpfully, your focus. So either you're like completely unfocused or hyper-focused.
Right.
I've built this in a weekend, that sort of stuff. Yeah. And I don't think it's like happening more and more. I do think we all sort of live in a society where we're switching context so often that maybe we often feel that we have ADHD. Yeah. But in terms of an official diagnosis, I don't, I think we're finally naming what up to this point has been quirky personality traits, or judgmental, like, well, you really need to parent a little better because your child can't sit still.
Right.
So there's a lot of like ugly stuff you start unpacking. Yeah. Women are so underdiagnosed because doctors often say like, oh, what happened to you with your like motherhood planner? You must be depressed. And so women get diagnosed as depressed, not ADHD, because that is not computing. In any event, I will step out of the neuroscience to say that I took this coach training class this year, again, to support my clients. And everything I just said is really effing relevant in a workplace.
Yes.
Ability to perform with regularity, watch a calendar, meet a deadline, working memory. Like we've been talking this whole time about knowing your 4 people that report into you, remembering whose dog is whatever. Yeah. I mean, if that disappears after the one-on-one, that's going to be really hard for you to recap. And then you start to wonder if you're a manager with ADHD and you're writing performance reviews where you look back at the whole year, how did it go? You're going to get like a week of information and the rest of it is black box. Yeah. So I feel very interested in, called to me, this is like my new, 1848 gold rush situation where I'm like, yo, this is where we're going because all these kids who are now going to be growing up with this self-awareness, they're going to need to be welcomed into a workforce that can support people of different, brain constructions. Yeah. So I think a lot about what services or structures can we put into modern workplaces. For example, only invite people who need to be at a meeting. If you don't need to be at the meeting, then you're going to, especially if you're a person with ADHD, you're going to be fighting to pay attention. You're going to detract from the energy of the meeting, or make an agenda for the meeting so people don't go off rails in all these directions. Yeah. I'll pause there. This is like a TED Talk. But.
No, it's so good. I'm doing a talk on productivity and we're diving into executive functioning. And it's wild, but when you do a lot of coaching, you find the neuroscience behind the brain is a huge part of how people behave. Duh, that seems to make sense that would go together. And I have it, and I remember my partner and I worked on a calendar plan for me, and I fought it as an entrepreneur because I'm like, don't take away my freedom. Yeah. I was burning everything down around me, at the cost of my wonderful freedom that I loved. And she's like, if you will stop fighting me, I will give you everything you are actually wanting. Anyway, I'm completely focused, highly productive. But my calendar is managed by multiple people because I'm not good at that. But when I'm in my calendar, I am a machine.
Well, that is really a great model for people to hear because to your point, entrepreneurs, there's a huge percentage of entrepreneurs with ADHD.
Totally.
And it can be because they are visionary and they have so much energy and direction to go.
Right.
It can also be that like working in the like government or, something with like really big rules where it's like, this is slow moving and oh my God, kill me. It's like, that is not going to be fun or successful for the person with that, situation going on. However, you need structures to regulate you. Here again, this word comes, right? So you're naming both a partner who's helpful there, a structure with calendars.
Yep.
You're allowing other people, you're delegating to other people to sort of fold that in because you are a liability to your organization if you are not reliable and regulated. So if you have ADHD, or even if you don't, but you're kind of all over the place, you're a liability to the health and the medium term and long term success of the place you're at if you can't if you can't be reliable there. So I'm just starting to wade into this. Like I said, I have small coaching groups this fall for managers with ADHD and just working professionals with ADHD. I'm learning about it more all the time. And I don't know what next year looks like, but I could imagine it with new trainings for people that manage folks with ADHD or again, folks who are managers with it or products or I don't even know what, but I want to help people who are brilliant and wonderful, but just might not work in the like old school way.
Right. Yeah. That's so cool. And as we wrap this up, you have brilliant team members and just the world we've created is where we say, you're fine to work in your pajamas at home in your bedroom. And it's, sometimes it sets the wrong person up for complete failure. They just can't be in that relaxed, soft environment and just kill it.
Yep.
And they struggle. And it's like, you are so brilliant. Like, why? What is this deal? Like, because a company will fire you if you do not produce. That is kind of the end result of employment. And so it's like, the hands get tied of the company. Eventually, it's like you are just the most amazing, brilliant person, and you cannot and will not deliver. But, we put them in these places where it's just, no, this is where I chill and watch Netflix, and it's so hard to pull away and just be highly focused. I don't know. And all that's competing.
My last thought, I know we're wrapping up right here, but my last thought there is that this is the mountain that I'm curious to climb here, which is which side of the line does the responsibility for an ADHD accommodation fall on?
Yep.
Self-regulation, no doubt, is an individual's job.
Yep.
But is there, or I think there are, but what are the reasonable accommodations a workplace can make?
Right.
Not necessarily only for one individual, but, to make this a friendly, productive and possible workplace for folks who are neurodivergent. And, here is like, I've only done a little bit of like Disability Act reading, but, you start to see some of these same things, which is like, well, is it my job to make a ramp on the sidewalk or should you just find a better wheelchair? Right. And we're so early days in this, but I think it's going to be fascinating to watch unfold.
Cool. Well, it's unfolding, and I think we're going to all work through it. So very cool. Well, Jen, this was a great conversation. I thought it was going to be a shorter podcast, but it was way longer than I anticipated. Sorry, I kept asking questions.
I love it.
Very cool. Well, so where should people go just to find you? And the coaching you would do would be pretty mind-blowing. So where would they go find out more about that?
So you should go to beplucky.com. That is my website. And on Instagram, it's bpluckster. Someone had my Plucky handle.
Sorry.
RIP. But go to bpluckster on Instagram, and I post videos there every Monday about how to organize your week and, regular updates over there. And probably the simplest thing to do would be on the website to sign up for the newsletter.
Okay.
I send once a month reflections on work, and it's pretty well read. So
very cool.
People should check that out.
And it's beplucky.com.
You got it.
Okay. Jen, thank you for being on the Businessology Show. I appreciate
Thank you so much for having me, Jason.
Okay.
You are a delight.
Take care.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.